Hey everyone, welcome back to bageltcg. Today we're going to be doing a deck tech for our first hero of Uprising, Iyslander Stormbind, our elemental ice wizard here. Before we get into it though, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Whooped Wizard. You can support the channel using the affiliate link in the description and get 5% back on all box breaks. You can also support the channel through our Patreon, where there's a bonus video after every YouTube video that is longer, more rambly, and with a lot more context and detail to the video we talked about. But let's hop right into it here. So we've got Iyslander. Iyslander is going to be the first Uprising deck tech of the channel, so I'm super excited to bring this to you guys. I have been working on this deck with one of my teammates, Elijah Caleb, from Galaxxi Gaming, and he was a big Kano player. He still is a big Kano player, and so he was really excited for the new wizard. I was a big and am a big Olden player, and so I was also excited for a new ice control hero. So we kind of came together of our love of the two classes and started building this deck, and we've been working on it for a few weeks now. So I'm just going to show it off to you guys. This is 100% not the finished version. The hero just came out. It's technically not even out yet, and yeah, I mean, it takes months and months and months, and for a hero to ever reach even close to fully optimized. So just kind of a forewarning, I am sure that this 80 cards is not going to be the exact best 80 cards, but I think this is the best 80 card list we have discovered so far, at least. First, let's just look at the hero. So we have Iyslander Stormbind. She has Essence of Ice, which means she can play ice cards. She is an elemental wizard hero, so she can play wizard cards and elemental wizard cards. She has 4 intellect like normal, but she does only have 36 life because she is a wizard. They usually have less life. She's got more life than Kano, who starts at 30, but 36 life means you are a little bit less life than normal, and you do have to kind of keep that in mind as you're navigating your games. You are going to be kind of at a disadvantage from the get-go there. But she has 2 very strong hero abilities. The first one lets you play a blue non-attack action from your arsenal as though it were an instant on your opponent's turn. The second one, whenever you play an ice card on an opponent's turn, you make a frostbite under their control. So in combination, you can play an ice card from your arsenal every turn on your opponent's turn if it's blue, and they'll get a frostbite. So really strong combination of effects there. It also works really well with our weapon we're going to be using, Waning Moon. Waning Moon just does a ton of damage, so it deals for 2 resources, 2 arcane damage on your turn, and if it's not your turn, 3 arcane damage to the opposing hero. It's an instant and it costs 2 resources, and the only requirement is that you've played a non-attack action that turn. So on your opponent's turn, you can play an ice blue non-attack action from your arsenal. You'll give them a frostbite, you'll get whatever the effect of the card is, and then you can pitch a card to deal 3 arcane damage to them, which is a really, really good rate for 2 resources. Which is, it's basically better than a zap there on a weapon. So really good there, and definitely the key weapon. It's going to be a lot of Iyslander's damage. We're going to be using a lot of our cards to slow down our opponent, and our weapon's going to be dealing a lot of our damage. These 4 equipment on the right are our kind of main equipment, but we do have this new chess piece, Illuvian Constellas. This is going to be mostly for any matchup where we think we're going to need to pitch for Arcane Barrier a lot. That's basically all it's in there for. So against other wizards, maybe against some rune blades, we'll bring this in. You can, whenever you use Arcane Barrier with it, you put what's called the counter, an energy counter on it. You can hold up to 4 energy counters, and you can remove 2 energy counters to make your next staff cost 3 less. So it gives you a free staff activation on our weapon if you've blocked Arcane Barrier with it twice, and that is a once per turn effect. So the first time you prevent Arcane with it each turn. But that can save you a lot of resources. It's a very powerful chess piece, but it only does anything against other arcane-based decks, so it's not always going to be in. Right now, we've been testing out the Conduit of Frostburn arm piece here. This is just her common Ice Wizard arm piece from Uprising. It has Quell 1, which is definitely not the reason we're running it. Quell 1 is fine, but the main reason is the instant ability to destroy it, and then the next card we play this turn with an effect that deals arcane damage gains when this deals arcane damage to a hero, destroy a frozen card in their arsenal. So pretty strong here. We have, I think, 6 cards that freeze arsenals, and this lets us kind of turn our next card into a Command and Conquer after we have frozen an arsenal there. Next up, we've got Coronet Peak. This is the new legendary ice headpiece, and this thing is amazing. So not only does it block for 2, it also has the ability to, as an action, pay 3 resources and make target hero discard a card unless they pay 1 resource. That is just a phenomenal effect. It basically turns any single blue in our hand into a Winter's Bite blue, right? Winter's Bite blue has the same effect. Hero discards a card unless they pay 1, but this can turn any blue into that effect, right? Which is really, really good. And it keeps that card in our deck, which stops us from any kind of fatigue if that was going to happen. But it has a really nice combination with Channel Lake Frigid. Channel Lake Frigid, most people probably already know it, but just to pull it up here. Channel Lake Frigid, at the beginning of our end phase, we have to put a flow counter on it and then destroy it unless we put an ice card from our pitch zone on the bottom of our deck for each flow counter on it. So we have to make sure if we have this, if we play it on our opponent's turn at instant speed, on our turn we still need to put an ice card in our pitch zone to keep it around, right? So sometimes that can actually be a little difficult, and Coronet Peak here helps us keep that ice card and pitch it to Coronet Peak to keep that Channel Lake Frigid around. Our other 2 equipment are pretty standard. We've got Fandel Spring Tunic. We just play this whenever we're not against arcane decks. It can be nice to get that extra resource. And then Storm Striders. These just have the nice effect of being able to pay a resource to destroy it and play our next Wizard non-attack action as though it was an instant. It just kind of lets us have some bigger turns playing 2 non-attacks in a row. All right, now let's hop onto the deck here. I'm actually going to switch it to sideboard mode. This is usually how I like to look at my decks here. This way you can see kind of this main deck here, which I actually have listed as 54 cards, and then this sideboard here. As you see, since I only have 54 main and 26 side, that means you're pretty much always going to have to bring in 6 cards, which we're going to bring in 6 blues every time, and we can always change out other stuff from there. First, let's look at the different ice cards we've got in the deck. So we've got Aether Hail here. This is Aether Hail Blue. So Aether Hail is an ice wizard action. It blocks for 3. I think most, if not all of our wizard actions block for 3. It's a blue here. We also are running the reds, which deal 4 arcane damage. The blue deals 2, and it costs 1. So this is really nice in combination with our weapon, because our weapon costs 2 resources. So if we're playing this on our opponent's turn, for example, if we're playing the blue from our arsenal on our opponent's turn, we'll deal 2 arcane, we'll have 2 floating still, and we can use that 2 floating to deal 3 arcane with our weapon for a total of 5 arcane and a frostbite for our opponent. So pretty nice arcane damage there. The red is also really nice. It has a few uses. One, it can deal 6 arcane on our turn by playing this and then using our staff for 2 damage. So 6 damage on our turn is pretty nice, but also it does a clean 4 damage to some of the stronger dragons in Dramai that we're worried about. So the biggest dragon we're worried about, of course, is Thamai. Thamai makes it so we can't play any cards on our opponent's turn, but it has 4 health, and so we can kill it with a 1 Aether Hail Red. We're also a little worried about Mirror Guy. Mirror Guy stops us from popping their dragons, and this can kill that as well. So it's pretty nice at killing dragons. Let's see, our next ice card here. We're playing 3 red Eisenhower Weather Vein. This is a card that we very recently added, but it ends up being just a ton of disruption. We can keep it in our hand, and it's really good off of a Tunic. So we can use our Tunic counter to play this, and then we can play one of our 0-cost fuse cards. We've got Ice Binds as one of our 0-cost fuse cards. We've got Brain Freezes here as another 0-cost fuse card, and then we've got Encases as a 0-cost fuse card. Any of these in combination with Eisenhower Weather Vein are going to be 4 Frostbite to our opponent, plus some nice damage and their effect. And we have other fuse cards too, like Aether Ice Vein, but this one does cost some resources to play, which we can totally do. But back to our ice cards, we've got 3 Blizzard here. Blizzard, very strong card. The nice thing is that we can play it from our hand, right? It doesn't have to just be from Arsenal. And since it's an ice card on our opponent's turn, it still will guaranteed give them a Frostbite. So in our deck, this actually it makes our opponent have to pay 3 resources because they have to pay 2, and it gives them a Frostbite when we play it. So Blizzard gets even better in Iyslander. We've got a new ice card, Arctic Incarceration. It is a 0-cost blue ice card blocks for 2, and it makes a Frostbite token under target hero's control. And if we're playing it from our arsenal, it's on an opponent's turn, so they'll actually get an extra Frostbite from our ability. So this is 0 for 2 Frostbites on our opponent's turn, which is pretty nice. We're playing 3 Amulet of Ice. Amulet of Ice has an instant ability to destroy it and then make your opponent discard a card or pay 2 if you've Ice Fused this turn, but we can Ice Fuse almost every turn, and so this will be online a lot, and it's a very nice card to keep out. And when you think your opponent's going to have a big turn, or when you're having a weaker turn, you can use it to take some extra cards from their hands. We've got Channel Lake Frigid, probably the best ice card in the game. Makes all of our opponent's cards and activated abilities cost an additional resource. And yeah, this is the classic card, has Go Again, has Channel Ice. Yeah, all the great effects there. Another new ice card here, we've got Cold Snap. Cold Snap is a blue, just like basically all of our ice cards, except for the red Aether Hails. It blocks for 2, it costs 1, and it says when you play it from your arsenal, you draw a card, which is already pretty great because we're usually going to play it from our arsenal. And it says target hero may pay a resource if they don't freeze a card in their arsenal or an ally they control until the start of your next turn. So freezing is when that object can't be played or activated. So a lot of times you're going to be freezing arsenals, although against Dramai, sometimes you'll freeze an ally. But you'll freeze their arsenal unless they pay 1, which they can. But if they don't, they cannot use that arsenal until the start of your next turn. So pretty nice ability there. And the main thing is that it draws a card, and you'll still have 2 floating if you pitch a blue for this. So you can still wand after it for 3 damage. Then we've got Frosting here. Frosting deals 1 arcane for 0 resources. Also blocks for 3. This is just an easy way to turn on our wand on our opponent's turn. And it blocks and fuses, and it does all the things that we want an ice card to do. One of our Ice Majestics from Uprising is Insidious Chill. This card is a powerhouse card. It costs 3 resources, and it blocks for 2, so it's kind of intensive on the resources. But when it enters the battlefield, it has 3 frost counters on it, and every time you Ice Fuse, you remove a frost counter, and then if you do, target hero discards a card unless they pay 2. So it's basically 3 Amulet devices that we just went over on 1 card. And it costs you 3 resources, so it does cost you basically 2 cards, right? Because you have to pay a blue and Insidious Chill. But 2 cards for 3 cards of value is pretty great, and it gives your opponent a Frostbite when you play it on their turn. This card just does a lot of stuff, and it has proven to be one of the more powerful cards in the deck. Next, we've got one of Iyslander's specializations. This is Frost Hex here. Frost Hex costs 3 resources, it blocks for 3, and it's a blue Ice Wizard action. So it's an affliction, which means it actually enters the battlefield under an opponent's control. And it says Frostbites you control have at the beginning of your end phase. This deals 1 arcane damage to you. So important to note here, this doesn't mean that every time a Frostbite is destroyed, they take an arcane. This is when your Frostbites disappear on their own at the beginning of the opponent's end phase. So if they have leftover Frostbites that they weren't able to pay for in that turn, and they move to their end phase and those Frostbites destroy themselves, they will take arcane damage equal to the number of Frostbites that are destroyed there, right? So, but if they're just paying for the Frostbites, it does not deal any damage there. You have to make sure you stack up enough where they cannot pay for all of them. And then our last ice card in the main deck is just Winter's Bite Blue here, another classic ice card. 0 resources for Go Again and making a target hero discard a card unless they pay 1, blocks for 2, does all that nice stuff. Now let's look at some of our damage-based cards here. So our best one is Aether Ice Vein here. This costs 3 resources, but it attacks for 5 arcane damage, and it has Ice Fusion, so if it's fused and deals damage to a hero, they discard a card unless they pay 2. All of these, what I call Frostfang effects, because they were originally on the card Frostfang from Tales of Aria, that say discard a card unless they pay 2. All of these Frostfang effects are really good. We've got them on Aether Ice Vein, we've got them on Amulet of Ice, we've got them on Insidious Chill, and they're all very, very strong, and we want basically as many as we can get. So Aether Ice Vein is probably our strongest damage-based card. We've also got Brain Freeze here. This does not deal damage, but for 0 resources, it has target opponent reveal their hand, and if you Ice Fuse it, you can put an action card with cost 2 or less from their hand on top of their deck. So you're kind of trading 1 card for 1 card, which might not seem great, but you are Ice Fusing, which means you can do cool stuff like get a counter off of Insidious Chill, activate Amulet of Ice, trigger Eisenhower Weather Vein. So we have a lot of stuff that benefits from Ice Fusing. So we really like these 0 cost Ice Fuse cards. Our other 0-cost Ice Fuse cards is Encase. This is a 0 for 3 arcane, and if it was fused, you deal damage, and it deals damage to a hero, you freeze that hero and all equipment they control until the start of their next turn. So freezing a hero is only good sometimes because they have to have activated abilities. If they have just passive abilities like Briar, for example, it doesn't do anything to Briar on her hero ability. It's only going to affect her armor, which could still be nice. It means she can't activate Tunic, she can't activate Snapdragons, she can't activate her gloves. So it's still going to have a solid effect, but it does not do as much against every hero. It's much stronger against maybe a Galaxxi, for example. It turns off her from activating her ability. So still a very good card, but even better in certain matchups. We've also got Icebind here. Icebind is another 0 for 3, and if it was fused and deals damage to a hero, you freeze a card in their arsenal until the start of their next turn. So this is our other freezing an arsenal card, similar to Cold Snap here. This one also freezes an arsenal. We are still trying to figure out, we don't know for sure, we're still trying to figure out with judges because it's kind of complicated. If you activate Conduit of Frostburn first, and it says your next attack has when this deals arcane damage to a hero, destroy a frozen card of their arsenal. If you activate that and then play Icebind, if you can stack the triggers in such a way where first their arsenal is frozen from Icebind and then the damage triggers Conduit of Frostburn and destroys it. I'm not sure if you can stack it, but if you can, that's a very good combo. We are just not 100% sure on that. Our other damage card here is Polar Cap. This is kind of the weakest one and the one I'm least excited about, but it's probably necessary still. It does some nice damage. It's a 2 for 4 damage here, and if it was fused and deals damage to a hero, you create a Frostbite token under their control. The best synergy with this is with Eisenhower Weathervane Red because it costs 1, and then Polar Cap costs 2. So on a blue, you can do both of them. And then it gets a lot of value, right? Because you're going to give them 5 Frostbites, which is going to turn off most people's turn. So the big synergy here is with Eisenhower Weathervane, but otherwise it's still a fine card. 4 damage is still totally fine. And then the last 2 cards we haven't gone over yet is Sigila Permafrost. This card is amazing. It's a defense reaction. It is a 1 cost and it blocks for 4. If you Ice Fuse it though, the next time you deal arcane damage to a hero, you create that many Frostbites. And that is any kind of arcane damage, so it works with our Waning Moon staff. So off of a blue resource, you can play this for 1, Ice Fuse it, and then you can pay your 2 floating to use Waning Moon, and they will make a number of Frostbites under the opponent's control equal to how much they take from Waning Moon. So if they take all 3 from Waning Moon, they'll get 3 Frostbites, and so on for 2 damage and 1 damage, etc. But a really strong combination, so we definitely always want the Sigil of Permafrost in, except against maybe Wizards where they don't really have any attacks. But this card is in against almost every deck in the game. Like I said, with the exception of decks that don't have any attack actions, but it's in most of the time. And then I think our last card I haven't gone over yet in the main board here is Nourishing Emptiness. This is just a nice one of here. We don't have any other attack actions in our main deck, so it has the ability of Dominate, and if it hits, our hero gets +1 intellect, so we'll draw 5 cards if this hits. It's just a nice threat. It blocks for 3. It kind of does everything we want anyways, and sometimes it'll come in for a nice 6 Dominate and give us an extra intellect if it hits. So it's a nice threat. It's a nice little one-of to keep in there, and I definitely like it in the deck. Let's hop into the sideboard here. So we've got a lot of nice attacks in the sideboard here. We've got the classic Command and Conquer. Command and Conquer is great along with Erase Face. The reason we have so many 6-power attacks, like these 3 Erase Face, these 3 Command and Conquer, and the 1 Nourishing Emptiness, is because we are going to struggle into Illusionist. We don't have a lot of ways to deal with auras because we don't have a lot of attacks. And we definitely need ways to pop their dragons with our Phantasm Poppers, to pop any heralds that come in. Our worst matchup is almost definitely the Illusionists, and we need as many poppers as we can get. They're also pretty good threats on their own. I mean, Erase Face here, when it hits a hero, cards and tokens they own lose all class and talent types until the end of their next turn. We'll still bring this in against stuff like Phi. This makes all of their cards no longer Draconic, so if it hits at least, it makes them no longer Draconic, so they can't get Draconic Chain Links. It turns off their Phoenix Flames. It turns off almost everything Phi can do. So really powerful card against certain matchups. They're not just for Illusionists, right? I mean, we'll bring in Command and Conquer against Galaxxi, for example. try to destroy both of their arsenals in one go. So there's definitely matchups we want these cards in. We've also got one more in case in the sideboard here, just in case. They are a hero this can affect better. So for example, Galaxxi that wants to activate their hero ability. For example, a FAB that wants to activate their hero ability. This can be pretty nice to turn that off in addition to its other effects. We've got another Majestic here in the sideboard actually. This is Freezing Point. Freezing Point costs 3. It deals 5 arcane damage to target hero. But if it was fused, it instead deals X arcane, where X is 5 plus the number of frostbites, ice afflictions, and frozen cards they control. So this card is a little slow in a lot of matchups. 3 for 5 with no disruption effect is usually not going to be good enough, especially against any aggro decks. This isn't going to be good enough. But this card's really good against slower decks where we can stack up our ice afflictions, right? We can put 3 frost hex under their control, so we get 3 frost hex that are ice afflictions. We can maybe play a Eisenhower Weather Vein to give them 4 frostbites, and then if they have 3 of those afflictions, they have 4 frostbites. This is going to deal, and then you fuse this, right? That's 4 frostbites, 3 afflictions for 7. This alone is just dealing 12 arcane damage, right? So if you have time to set up, this card can deal just absolutely massive amounts of damage, but it's pretty hard to set up against aggro decks. You're probably never going to play a Frost Hex against an aggro deck. It's a little too slow. It doesn't actually do anything, and they're usually not going to end their turn with Frostbites unless you're able to get a ton of them. So, you'll play Frost Hex sometime against aggro decks if you have the resources and they're having a slower turn. But usually if the aggro deck is churning along pretty well, you're not going to have time to resolve a Frost Hex. So this card's mostly against control decks when you can set up really big turns, and you have that time to set up big turns. You're not going to be able to really resolve this against aggro decks. We've also got one Remembrance here. This is for matchups that are able to block Arcane Barrier really well, like Oldhim, and we just need to put some of our stronger cards, like Freezing Point, for example, back into the deck and try to get them again, and just try to resolve them a second time there. So pretty good card. You can also get back these Ice Eternals here. This is our other specialization. It costs XX, and it has Ice Fusion. You make X Frostbite tokens under target hero's control. Then if it was fused, you deal arcane damage to that hero equal the number of Frostbites. So this card is really slow. It costs like 6 resources just to make 3 Frostbites, which is pretty bad considering you can make 3 Frostbites for... you can make 2 Frostbites just for 0 resources, right, with Arctic Incarceration. But to make 2 Frostbites with Ice Eternal, you have to pay 4 whole resources. So usually it's pretty slow, and we're not going to want to resolve it that often against aggro decks if we don't have the resources for it. But it can be really nice against control decks as well if you're stacking multiple Frost Hexes, because they're not going to be able to pay for the Frostbites at that point, and they're going to take damage from each Frost Hex. So if you can Ice Eternal pitching 10 resources into it, like if you can pitch, or 12 resources into it, if you play this from your arsenal, and you can pitch 4 blues, I guess it won't be fused then. So if you can pitch 3 blues and a Tunic counter maybe for 10 resources, this will deal, make 5 Frostbites, it'll deal 5 Arcane, and then they will, at the end of their turn, take a damage for each of those Frostbites from Frost Hex, so 15 damage from the 3 Frost Hexes. So you could do like a 20 damage combo with 3 Frost Hexes and an Ice Eternal. So that's kind of how you're going to beat these slower decks, because we can't burn them down if they're on a bunch of Arcane Barrier. Our other ice cards here in the sideboard are Hypothermia. This is a new Majestic as well. It costs 0. It's an affliction, so it enters under an opposing hero's control. And it says attacks you control can't gain Go Again. So if it already has Go Again written on the card, like Head Jab, it still has Go Again. But if it would gain Go Again, like Scar for a Scar, it doesn't, right? So this can hurt decks that want to gain Go Again a lot. It's really, really good against Briar. They don't really have any attacks that have Go Again built in. The only one is Ravenous Rabble. So this will destroy almost all of their synergies. Their Embodiment of Lightnings can't give Go Again anymore. None of their cards can gain Go Again, or attacks at least can't gain Go Again. So really good against some decks like Briar, but against other decks like Fi, who almost has Go Again on all of his cards already, it doesn't do as much. It'll still do something against Fi, but it's a little bit weaker. And against some decks like Guardian that don't want to Go Again on their attacks at all, it does nothing, right? So Definitely has some matchups where it's useless and some matchups where it's just backbreaking. So very kind of polarizing card here. We've also got Channel the Bleak Expanse. So Channel the Bleak Expanse here is another new Majestic. It cost 1. It has Go Again, and it says Heroes, so both heroes, can't draw cards, reveal cards, or search decks from effects. And then it has the similar Channel Ice effect to Channel like Frigid. So this card does hurt us a little. It says reveal cards. We can't reveal cards, which means we're not allowed to Ice Fuse while it's out. But it usually will hurt our opponent more, right? So if our opponent tries to play Artivore, right, we can instant speed play this from our arsenal, and then they will draw 0 cards. So they will still banish a card, and they will draw 0. So they're down their Artivore, they're down the card they banished, they're down the resource, and they're drawing 0. They basically lose that turn on the spot. There's cards like 3 of a Kind, where the Ranger draws 3. This will make them draw 0. Blood Rush Bellows, they'll pay 1 and discard a card to Blood Rush and then draw 0. It can just do a lot of power, and usually we'll bring it in against any deck that likes to draw cards a lot, that likes to search their deck. And this will hopefully hurt our opponent a lot more than it hurts us. So those are basically our 9 blues here in the sideboard. We're usually going to bring in at least 6 of those blues. You can see we're at 54 cards in the main deck, and we have 39 blues. I'd like to be at least 36 blues all the time. That's still a little lower, but it's as comfortable as I'm going. So we need to bring in at least 6 blues here to be able to go to that 36. So basically, you're going to look at these 3 ice cards here. Well, actually, Ice Eternal is an elemental wizard card. But you're going to look at these 3 different blue cards here, and you're just going to choose the worst one, right? So if you're against Guardian, easy choice. Hypothermia does nothing. You're going to bring in Channel the Bleak Expanse and Ice Eternal. If you're against maybe like in an aggro deck where Hypothermia and Channel the Bleak Expanse both do something, so example Briar, if they have a lot of effects that draw cards, their Sonata reveals cards, Channel the Bleak Expanse is going to be pretty nice, and so is Hypothermia, so we'll leave out Ice Eternal there. All right, so you're usually going to choose the one that does the least in each matchup and just leave that one out, and you'll bring in the other 2. If we want to bring in any of these other sideboard cards, we're going to have to cut some red cards here, right? So some easy red cards to start cutting. If they're a deck that isn't throwing any attacks at us, we can cut Sigila Permafrost. If they don't have a hero ability we want to fuse much, or we want to freeze, we can cut Encase here. If they have a lot of expensive attacks that aren't 2 or less, we can take out Brain Freeze. We could take out Polar Cap if we think we just need extra slots, because Polar Cap's definitely the weakest. If we don't think it's going to be as useful, we can take out Red Aether Hail. So there's a lot of stuff we can take out, but usually we're going to take out red cards for other red cards. So if you want to bring in any of these red cards, you should take out a red card. But we should always bring in 6 of these blue cards here to make sure we're at 36 blues, and we'll have 3 in our sideboard. So this was a bit of a longer video. I wanted to give a pretty in-depth view of the deck since it is the first time showing off this hero on the channel. Just wanted to make sure I showed it off with a little more detail and kind of went through all of the cards and all of the choices. Matchup-wise, it's felt pretty solid so far. It feels like it has a good game into any of those aggro decks in the format. It's able to freeze them. I think it might have decent game even to any of the control decks where you can set up Frost Hexes. Its worst matchups are probably the Illusionist, so Jermai and Prism. We don't have any way to really deal with auras efficiently, and we don't even have a lot of ways to deal with dragons efficiently, so we're not super excited about playing the Illusionist matchups. And we also aren't super excited about Fi either, just because they have access to Thaw, and Thaw can be pretty annoying sometimes, but I think we have pretty good game into most of the decks in the format, and I think Iyslander has the potential to be like a tier 2 or even higher deck. I think right now I would put her at like tier 2, but I think she definitely has the potential to be a stronger deck for sure. But yeah, so, actually I should say, I know my tier list didn't have her at literal tier 2, but that tier list was not like, here's tier 1, tier 2. That was a tier list of what chance I think each hero has to be good, right? So even though I had her at like tier 3 or 4, that doesn't mean she is tier 3 or 4. That means I think she has a lower chance of being the best deck. That was more like, what are the odds that this hero has to be the best deck? And I think she has low odds to be the best deck, but I think she has definitely decent odds to be at least a haymaker in the metagame and get you some wins at your local armory. So yeah, that's Iyslander so far. We're definitely working as a team on building some Fi and Dromai decks for you still, but they're proving a little bit more harder to build than Iyslander. Iyslander was a little, at least easier for me to build because we already knew a lot of ice cards and we knew how ice decks built. We've never experienced Draconic decks before, and there's just so many options, really. It's not like the decks are hard to make good. It feels like we have pretty good Dromai and Fi lists, but there's just so many options of cards to choose from. It's kind of hard to be like, okay, this is the best 80 cards for Fire Dromai, just because there's so many different options to choose from. But nonetheless, I will probably make a video with them soon and just hope that we've got a good 80 for you. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Check out the Patreon if you're a patron for an extended version of this video in the coming day or two. Thank you for all for watching and for all your support. I'll see you next time.